Hey, Alex.
Hey, good. What is it? Good morning. Good afternoon on the East Coast.
I'm in Chicago, so 12 o'clock, midday.
Oh, nice.
Figured I'd listen in. You guys are at.
Oh, all right. Well, as per usual, we'll I guess wait until three after and get this started.
I started doing that, and then people don't show up until 5 after.
You're right. This is a slippery slope, right?
Doesn't matter how many minutes you wait, people always show up after.
Well, sometimes a 3 minute saves me. So
I think it's a good policy in general. It gives people a chance to use a quick restroom break or something like that between meetings.
because we've all resolved to just sitting in meetings for the first 6 hours of every day, right? Oh, so as a heads up, Rom and Steve and Hugo are not going to be here today, so um, this might be the extent of our attendance. All right, I have three after. Um, pretty sure I'm pretty sure that's somewhat close to atomic time, so I feel comfortable getting started. Okay, so I've just pasted the agenda in chat here today. I have been personally very a little bit distracted, so my participation in the GitHub activity is admittedly sparse lately, but it's just fall, I guess. I'm going to blame it on the fall. But I think we could use this time productively to. Well, I guess the first agenda item is moot because there's no new attendees, unless Josh, you want to role play as a new working group.
Um,
You don't have to take that seriously. It's fine. Um, oh, hey Kyle. Um, all right, so I think we're kicked off here. I guess as far as part of our kickoff, did anybody have any updates from the projects or the works that they've been engaging in over the past 2 weeks they want to share before we go into the admin updates? All right, can take that as a no.
I guess I could mention to you that the people that work on Porter and CNAP reached out to me. I just thought of it just now that might be relevant.
Yeah.
So I might we'll see how that progresses, but I might ask them to participate here. Cloud native application bundles that came out of Microsoft, I guess, in like 2019. It's like an early form of, I guess, bundling a bunch of stuff into a OCI container, right? So I might send them your way to adhere to some sort of pattern.
I've never seen it in the wild though.
What's that?
I've never seen CNAP like the I've never seen. I don't know why. I don't know what the history is behind it, why it didn't take off, or
Yeah, maybe it's too late for them. They're still around. It's a project in it's a sandbox project.
So Hugo, who was here last meeting, he had said that he was part of this. So we might already have attendance from, I don't know if he's still, how involved he is with the project, but he did reference it when he introduced himself.
Was he from Microsoft?
I don't know.
Okay.
Let me look at the notes.
Order.
No, Datadog.
Okay. Interesting. All right, well, I'll let you know if that goes, and I'm trying to listen to see where you all are at with defining, any sort of patterns, and that's what I would, point them to.
I thought CNAB was because it was coming out of all of Microsoft's WASM work, wasn't it? So I thought it was more centered around WebAssembly, but I guess I could have misinterpreted the entire initiative.
It was Cloud Native Application Bundle. I get the feeling that they were looking at how you package up like a full Helm chart with all the images with it, or those kind of scenarios where you're bundling more than just the one application, but a whole package together.
Yeah, exactly.
So
it's all about bundling a bunch of stuff, and then they even have the bundle runtime, which I guess executes, deploys the bundle. It's pretty similar to the way CSVs in operator framework work.
Well, I think there's more to talk about on the specific topic. So I think we should revisit that in this working session. Just real quick before we do, Josh, since we have you, hey Steve, Josh,
hey,
just since, hey, hey Victor, I guess we got a couple other ones. Cool. I see. Brandon was right. We're going to starting these meetings at 5 after and then 8 after until stupid joke. So
not at all. Not at all. It's all good.
Look at you, Steve. You always have the best scenery in these calls, man.
I got to say, it's a fun day.
Dude. Yeah.
And the lock's going down.
I'm trying to contain a display of my jealousy for you right now, so I'm not gonna.
It's all the sailing thing, man. It's we're all part of the same thing. Anyway.
No, so I was we had just had a very quick introduction just to catch everybody up about discussing some potential CNAB interest. And then we're tying that back to Hugo's participation in our last working session. And then, but before we jump into that, just sticking to the agenda, Josh, since we have you here, I didn't know if there were any admin updates or anything that from the tag, the side of things that we should be concerned about or tracking as a group.
Nothing huge. I mean, it's up to you all, I guess. Like, we're open if you would want to publish a blog post or something about your work. It will be relevant, I guess. Think about Paris. I mean, KubeCon, we will be meeting. We'll have a project meeting on Monday morning for a few hours. So if you're going to be there, I don't know. Is anyone here going to be at KubeCon? No. Yeah, I know it's harder and harder for us to get our employers to send us. Yeah, so we'll have a meeting there. We'll probably talk a little bit about artifacts. I'll read over everything and try to represent a little. Maybe I'll talk with you, Alex and Ram, about representing virtually that morning. I'll talk to you about that. So yeah, KubeCon Chicago, but then KubeCon Paris, if you're interested in, I'm trying to get them to let every working group submit a session. Right now it's been mostly tag, but I could probably get you a session there. So yeah, have that in mind. I mean, obviously it needs to be really valuable, but it's a good chance it'll be accepted. About the work you're doing, about, something you've accomplished or something you want to share. Yeah, no other real updates. If you have any questions for me, anything I can help you with, administrative angle.
Okay. I thought what you had said about you just brief and not in the same words, but you briefly touched on our working group's output. By consolidating this information or conducting this research, what is our output? I think is the question there. And so I was thinking, like, should we right now kind of like initiate writing a white paper about our initial research? Would that be the right approach here, so that when we go to these engagements, that we already kind of at least have our thoughts together, or have drawn preliminary conclusions from the work that's already been done?
I mean, I guess I'm kind of looking to you all. Do we have enough now to gather together and write a report on here's the state of, however you want to describe it, packages and metadata? It's not a rush. I guess it's up to you, and have we defined deliverables or outcomes? I mean, don't write a paper if it's not time for it, I guess.
I'd love to get Kyle and Steve's thoughts on this, especially because they've been very active in GitHub. Me a little bit less so, and then of course Ram would also have valuable input here. But as far as what we already have, I mean, do you think it's appropriate to start talking about what our output or deliverables are here from this initial work?
You could describe what you're trying to come out with, yeah. And you could describe a couple, like you've got a couple package managers fully listed, and maybe describe, what you've gathered up. I don't know, at a high level.
Well, I think one thing we can say with what we have now, and we need to add more. I think it's too early to write anything, but we could talk about what do we think we might get out of it. I think what we would get out of it is a pseudo concrete list of what OCI is missing to support the general use case of package manager, right? I think we have a few nuggets that have showed up already. I think we'll get a few more if we look at some more of these, and then at least then we'll have a definition of what the problem is that we're trying to solve, that we want to, I presume ultimately make a API extension for OCI registries, but that's all TBD.
Yeah, I could see an article saying we are exploring how to generalize OCI as, a general package format and package management API. Here's, what we've learned so far. Here's some gaps compared to the ecosystem. That could make a good article. Yeah, could see that.
Where do we publish that?
I would say two places. One, you could publish it on the tags blog, but that's pretty small distribution. So we would ask CNCF to syndicate it, basically, and put it on CNCF blog.
Are we saying like a 500 word like preliminary blog post is what we're saying? Something short, but just describing our activity so far.
That would be pretty cool if you could get something. I mean, I don't know that we could get it in before KubeCon, so that's what that's sort of like. But if you got something even in like the week or two after KubeCon, and we can share it around, and we can point to it, in Paris. I like. You could wait till Paris also, and that's another option. Like you could plan to get a good article like this together by February, or you could try to get
I
something
think
done.
February is a reasonable time frame. I mean, I think writing something up and kind of talking about our goals, which is in our charter, right? It's not magically new, and creating interest from others to enjoy, and engage. I do want to continue to repeat, this is not just about making OCI. It's also kind of all package managers. We're not trying to break what's not broken. The existing package managers have a lot for us to learn from OCI, and there's things that in OCI we can apply to the other package managers. So, my favorite is put the SBOMs alongside the things the SBOMs are written about. I'd love to see NPM and NuGet and all these other do that, as well as we can do this in OCI. And then for anybody that's making new package types, please don't get another underfunded package manager. So that would be kind of like the high level themes of it. And then this way, because if we talk about just as OCI, then we're basically creating a competition with the others, and that's not our goal. Our goal is to raise the bar for all package managers, and help artifact authors know there are existing ones that they can leverage rather than trying to create a new one.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree with what you're saying. I think I don't want to make it, we wouldn't want to make it like OCI specific. We want to say, I liked your idea, your example of the SBOM going back. OCI does a good job at that. Other package managers don't. I think another theme in the paper could be, our goal is to bring out like guidance and best practices for, if you want to use OCI, here is the canonical best practice on how to do it. And here's the gaps that you might have or whatever, just that aspect of it as well for the underfunded package manager use case.
Yeah. And I'd love to have the other package managers say, here's what we've done, because there's gaps in OCI and there's gaps in the others. And how do we raise the bar for all of them? So it's like a collaborative paper as opposed to, well, not opposed to, just it's a collaborative paper, and hey, we're trying to raise the bar for everybody. Please help us. Bring your expertise, bring your experience.
I don't want to go off on a tangent here, because I feel like I'm in danger of doing that every day, every time but so OCI, and Brandon, I'm going to say something and you're going to probably recoil a little bit where you're at. I'm sorry, but like when I think of OCI, I'm thinking of an object store. We transact in blobs with OCI, and so when we have this comparison of OCI to other package types, I sometimes I don't understand the comparison, because it seems like we can use OCI for whatever we want, right? And then it's just a matter of what are we indexing at that point. And then this is where I totally squirrel off and say then we can reference any artifact, right, from an OCI registry. And then we start talking about federation, and this goes back to what Steve's talking about. Don't fix what's not broken. We have package managers that work, so why would we try to emulate those in OCI? We would just reference the content from those, right? So I don't know if that helps with what we're talking about here, but that was the first thing that came to my mind as I heard this dialogue.
Well, you called me out, so I'll go ahead and chime in next. Yeah, OCI, you can put anything in OCI, but it doesn't mean that all the tools are able to find the data they're looking for and the method they want to find it. Thinking of how we want the search API and stuff like that. And so, yeah, we can put it there, we can store it there. You may be able to build a query interface, but it might not be the query interface that people want. So that's where we're looking for what the gaps are to try to solve those. The one other point I wanted to make real quick, I think I made it last week, but to the thought that we want to update all the other package managers out there, I just want to make sure that before we expand too far outside of what our comfort area is, that we have people that can actually be receptive to each of those ideas, whether we have somebody on the NPM side or the PyPy or something like that, to be able to extend all these other package repositories with what we're thinking of.
This notion that we're going to be, yeah, go ahead, Steve.
Well, I was saying, I think the burden's on us to look. Everybody's busy, So every one of those package managers has people that are busy with lots of things. Why should they justify spending time here? And that's up to us to show them that we think that there's value across all the package managers to raise the bar for all. So I think the examples we've been putting out are great primers. And then I think the bar is to get people from those package managers, experts in those package managers, to engage and say, yeah, this is where we're doing well. This is where we need some help. This is where you should, just plain out copy. And here's where you should run to the hills. So I think we've got a good baseline for that. And so that's the opportunity for us to start reaching out to those folks and say, look, is there something here that you'd be interested in participating in?
I think I think it's unreasonable to expect the industry or these ecosystems to conform or to modify or contort themselves around what we're doing. And I know it's too early to talk about what our approach is, but as we're having these discussions, I would really like to see an opt-in model where package managers keep publishing their packages like they do, and they can optionally reference the contextualization of their artifacts from this other source, so that there's no change to what they're doing. They can just opt into subscribing to more information or context about the nature of their packages, their artifacts.
The challenge they have with that is that the value that OCI brought when we were looking at how we were going to design the way we were packaging SBOMs and other things is that we put the SBOM, the signature, and everything else alongside the artifact that we were shipping so that it came through the exact same channel. Whatever path someone had to pull down the container image, they could pull down the SBOM with it. And so that puts an onus onto those other package repositories if they want to follow a similar pattern. And so that's where I get a little nervous if we say we want to do this everywhere, that I just don't think we have the resources to do it everywhere. I'd love to see if we can. I just don't think we have it. Go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, actually,
Josh.
sorry. I just want to jump in because that's actually right along my point. I was going to actually share, there might be some low-hanging fruit. We mentioned CNAB and Porter. Here's another one, which is the WASM folks trying to get into OCI. Like, what if and maybe like Steve will say, maybe the next person that's creating a package manager, we tell them, come talk to us first. Like, maybe that's our first priority, is the folks that are already proximate to OCI, like WASM and Helm and operators. Just, yeah, you don't have to react. I'll put that link to that OCI in WASM discussion here in the notes.
I think just to build on this, and just to make sure we're doing the full circle of all we're engaging all of them. The idea is, there's lots of different ideas. Everybody's got a different view on how they'd like to do it, and that's what makes this great, because we've got some different perspectives on it. I think the idea is the way that using that SBOM example that Daniel was just talking about, I don't know if we want to try to convince the other package managers to put their SBOMs in OCI and then reference back to their package manager. What I'm actually suggesting is we can learn from the other package managers how they've done search. The other package managers maybe can learn from how we're putting the SBOMs and other artifacts alongside the container images. So if I'm pulling from NPM, pulling the package there, and somebody's configured the network rules and all the other stuff, pull from NPM, then they can also pull the SBOM from NPM for that package. Can they implement a similar pattern that we've done in OCI? In OCI, can we implement the search APIs that give them the versioning capability? So it's really a matter of what can we learn from each other so that each package manager can improve.
Yeah, I mean, I keep just finding like Acorn. So I don't know if you guys saw, I've heard from Acorn before in Tag App Delivery. They just came up with another like CNAB, basically putting a bunch of files together and then exploiting them themselves. So that's another one. Like, could we get these folks to come and join us here? I guess, yeah. I guess we're saying
Yeah, I
two.
think I think that's the great. If I thought about the blog, it would be: can we document enough to show others to be inspired to want to join? And if not, then we pack up, right? I mean, we're not trying to solve everybody's package manager. We're trying to get the experts together so that we can raise the bar.
And I think the onus is on us to help normalize the terminology and bridge that gap, right? Like human nature is that everybody thinks that they're doing their own thing and it's unique. Like I wouldn't even be surprised if Acorn didn't even know about CNAB, right? And like, oh yeah, we need this. It turns out it already exists in some form, maybe not the form they need, but pretty close, right? Is it a package? Is it a distribution? Is it an artifact? Is it a whatever? Like there's some notion of let's consolidate on some terms and make it easy for people to realize that you guys are doing kind of the same thing, so maybe that then we can start using the same terminology and learning from each other.
I was just going to really quickly just kind of hit on the I think what I'm hearing is no, I wonder if we just keep it in mind that we're this idea of contextualizing already published artifacts, right? We can show we can demonstrate from our research the way that we can mark up or contextualize this existing content, these existing formats, and then this kind of idea that's an opt-in where they could optionally reference this content or this strategy, for the context of these artifacts. But then where that model or where that prototype or where that we might find that we've defined a search capability, or a solution that allows us to get this context with these artifacts, and then we can have the discussion of migrating adoption into an OCI kind of like centric solution where we start normalizing these formats, how they're published and all this. So I'm wondering if there's a phased approach here where we kind of go through the show me phase and we show our opinion of how we can contextualize existing software artifacts, and then where we can go into a kind of like a migration phase where if the industry or these different projects have appreciation or confidence in that approach, and they can start talking about migrating from their current distribution model into an OCI centric like solution. I don't know if that's an approach that what we're saying here is compatible with that approach, or if that's a deviation from the current consensus of the.
Yeah, the way you say it, I hear it as start by informing them. Of course, they might shoot down our information, but it start by building a common understanding, then migration, what you were saying out, then try to actually get them to implement something. Yeah, I like that idea. You got to first tell everybody, this is what we think we should do. Then you got to convince them and let them argue about it. And then we can actually do it.
Well, with a prototype, right? Sorry, Josh. I don't know if I cut you off. Your video's lagged a little bit for me. So I'm sorry.
Oh no, yeah, absolutely. I agree. If a prototype helps to tell the information, great. MVP.
No, I was just going to bring up pretty much from the issue I linked there in the notes that the WASM group had been very active in saying, hey, we've got these new artifacts we're going to push to an OCI registry, and we pushed back at a certain point and said, these are runnable images. Just because it's for a different architecture, that's what OCI does really well. It handles stuff for a different architecture. They did have the point that some of their stuff can be run outside of a container runtime, and so they're probably in this gray area where they're straddling both. But it triggered a discussion of what's an image, what's an artifact, where do we draw that line, particularly for the container runtimes that are trying to look at this.
Yeah, getting involved. I mean, if we're really passionate, like WASM is literally the use case. You know, it's such a, we should be involved there. This group should be, I think, at least learn from what they come up with, if not influence what they come up with. I'm almost suggesting, yeah, that thread, participate in that thread. I see they even that thing you just shared, Brandon, is also in their Slack.
Yeah, there've been a few of those going back and forth with them just to sort out and make sure that we're all using the right words, the right language, that we're all packaging this stuff up in a way that makes the most sense for all the different parties that are involved here.
It seems like runtime is kind of addressed. I mean, whether it's a container image or an arbitrary binary or a WASM module, what the runtime defines is the parameters and conditions under which that artifact is going to be, the runtime environment of that, right?
If you dig into what they're looking at, the big differentiator when you package up, I'll do a quick, basically redoing my presentation from yesterday. The difference between an artifact and an image traditionally in OCI has been you change the media type of the config descriptor. And so instead of saying this is an OCI image config and passing that set of JSON, you pass your own JSON, or you can optionally set this other artifact type field in the manifest. And what the WASM group was doing was saying, well, we want to pass the same OCI image config because we're going to use those same fields, but we want to call it an artifact. And we start looking at it and saying, is it not? Which is it? So it caused a lot of back and forth in there and added confusion because they don't use the standard tar layers. They have just the individual WASM data shipped as their layers. So they are very much sitting in this gray area where they've got the OCI image config, which they may not want to keep forever, but it is runnable content that some container runtimes can run, but is also content that some people are going to run outside of a container runtime, so they're just going to pull those blobs directly. And so because of this place they're sitting between both sides of that equation, it makes them a very hard example to use for anybody else.
Yeah, that one's, there's a little bit of a furball with that one. I mean, I think the examples like Pulumi and Bicep, and there's just a bunch of others that aren't even container images that still need a package manager for them to ship their artifacts, their content. So I think those are the ones that are a little less controversial because it's not as overlap. But how many package managers can we run and host? So it's a good example of how we can leverage what exists.
And then we're saying the higher level construct on top of the runtime considerations is this idea of a bundle, right? Or something that conveys a larger deployment and the parameters within that environment, right?
The reason runtime considerations come into this is just because OCI has traditionally been a format for packaging data for runtimes to use. And so once you start packaging data for runtime, not for runtimes to use, for other systems to use, just needs to be some kind of division in there so the runtimes, when they're looking at it, know, I'm used to looking in a registry and finding my stuff. This isn't my stuff. Let me ignore it. So that's where some of these latest issues in OCI have been coming up, where they're looking at what makes sense there. But in general, as an artifact repository, once you're using it for an artifact, the runtime just isn't even part of the picture anymore at that point. It's going to be something that's not even used for parsing your artifact. You're going to be using the Porter or the Pulumi or the Helm or whatever it is that's going to be parsing this data, and we just don't even look at the runtime anymore.
There's a custom runtime for every handler, custom handler, I guess, for every image type, artifact type.
I mean, I think of this very similar to if you try to open a picture in Microsoft Word, right? It's like, oh, that's not, and then, you know, how do you have different applications know that this is not my thing? It's stored in the same location that somebody else is going to use their data types from, but it doesn't apply to me. Like, that's perfectly fine. So I think if we take it purely from, and the same thing can be said for NPM and NuGet and all these different package managers, is they're focused on a particular thing, but the challenge that it takes to actually run a package manager at scale is not trivial. So how can we, and it's the same problem for customers. How many do they have to run and manage? So how can we leverage the existing ones and generalize those so they can be used? And it just so happens the OCI one happens to be set up because it's used for production run times, that companies invest a lot to make sure that those are very reliable and performant and have all the security features. Doesn't mean the other ones aren't valuable as well. They're just different scenarios. How could we make sure that people that want to ship new types don't have to also create a package manager and convince companies to host them? Sorry, Alex, hand was raised. So.
Oh no, I raised it while you were after you started. So in the data model that I've been using to do some of my testing, I have two different type definitions for each reference. It's a location type definition that informs a client, a client, where the distribution endpoint that it's going to be accessing for the content, and then another type definition, which is the actual resource that it's going to be interacting with. So the client in that model has two references: how to retrieve and then how to interact with it once it's retrieved it. And so I'm trying to kind of overlay. That's just been my approach to I think some of the concerns we're talking about here. And then I took it a step further and then said that there's application interfaces that when a client discovers a type definition for a location, that it can load an application interface that actually allows the client to dynamically have cognizance of how to interact with that endpoint. And then a similar type application interface, when it retrieves a resource, it doesn't have to know natively or inherently how to interact with the resource, but it would know that it can retrieve that interface and then reliably execute it for its runtime interactions. So I don't know if that helps. I know this is once again another tangent, and I know that we're a little bit off track as far as our research and now as we've been discussing white paper activities or blogging. So
well, a lot of what we need to bring other people along the way is like, that's what I've learned, I guess, in the years that I've tried to work on these things. Like most of us probably already have half 80% of the solution worked out, but we got to bring everyone else along so that we end up with something which is just kind of similar that we all implement. So I guess what I'm saying, Alex, is like, that's where you're at is awesome. We I guess we're kind of talking today. How do we step back a little, even tell people this is what we're doing, we're trying to get to for these purposes. I really like how in the call today was all like, we're talking about what could we do next, and a paper setting a common set of terminology based on the research that we've done so far, that could go a long way. And like, to what you're saying, I'm trying to tie it back to what you were saying, Alex, like, we get that paper out and then we get, people talking about ways we could handle it, and then they might end up hopefully in 6 or 9 months saying something similar to you, and then we can go forward from there. Like, if we would tell them that today, they'd be like, what? We don't even understand the problem you're solving. So yeah, I mean, do we almost define like a paper like this as the first deliverable and try to get it done by February?
Yeah, I agree with you, Josh. I think that I was just kind of addressing this idea when a client it reaches a bundle, right? How does it know that that's a bundle? I think this is what Brandon they were talking about. It's like, how does it know that it's a bundle, and how does it differentiate a metadata about things from a runnable object, or runnable content. And so that's just kind of like like my preliminary, at least the way that I was trying to overcome this is like, just don't, you just essentially, it's a disgusting amalgam of polymorphism and in a bit of an absurd context, but it's just, yeah, I like what we're saying here. Yeah.
If we were to try to get a paper like that, one thing that I've seen happen in the past with papers is you need a spike. Like, it doesn't really work for a few people to write the first. I mean, it could. I don't know. You need something to party on. And maybe the first thing could be written by more than one person. Although usually I've seen it come from like one source. So I don't know. Is there someone here that might want to take a stab at writing, a list of definitions, what the structure of a paper might look like? That might be a place to start on that. I'm trying to.
I think that I don't want to think about that yet, because I want to get more. It's February. We've got time to collect some more data, get some more answers, and in these working groups, I think we should probably add a markdown file to our package manager, thing that talks about, here's some terms, definitions that we want to agree on, just so that we can all talk the same language, right? And then maybe in that, like, for example, in alpine.markdown, we do a quick little mapping. Alpine calls packages blah, or, and just to get everybody on the same page. And then we can speak the same language throughout the rest of it. So that might be a useful activity. Not this time, but maybe next time, to try to get terms in order for that activity.
Kyle, what you just said, I think that's if we want an outcome from this session, I think having a to do or I think what you just said is should be the outcome of this meeting, is that we define that work and plan it. I don't know if those captured in the notes. I've been doing a bad job of the notes.
I'm taking. Somebody could PR
Okay.
like you could, like, if you do have an opinion on like a glossary, that's I just shared the one that has kind of been evolving in platforms, where we kind of realized we wrote our first paper in the platforms group was to set a stage, like, what is a platform? What do we mean by platform engineering? Because there was so much ambiguity. We're like, we'll set the stage, and then we've gradually been finding there's still a little ambiguity, so we extracted out that glossary, so that it kind of fits together. I would almost say you don't have to discuss it. I mean, you can discuss it in the meeting, but sometimes it even works better if somebody submits a PR and then we debate the PR, like something to, even if somebody doesn't feel bad getting shot down, I'm pointing to myself, because that's what will happen. But sometimes it's easier to start with a v.1 than.
Yeah, every single definition would get changed, right? You just have to expect that to be the case.
And I think the writing down also helps, because as we're talking, we're not necessarily hearing the intent of what somebody's saying, but reading, you can say, what do you mean by this particular word? So we can clarify. So I think the writing and reviewing PRs and commenting on the PRs would be really helpful.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is we need a GitHub issue for a glossary, and then and I can take that issue, and I can take a stab at a glossary.md or something, like, something where we can.
I can make the issue right now if you want me to.
Cool. Yeah, and I'll pick it up, and if you can even assign it to me, and I can take a first stab at it. I'll probably load the whole repo into a vector database and tell ChatGPT to tell me all of the glossary terms, but I'll PR something.
I would almost say each term might need its own PR. it depends how many you have, but assuming there's not more than like 10 or 12. And you might end up needing, this is going to lead into the white paper. You're going to end up needing a document which kind of describes the whole thing. So I guess this is it's a good MVP towards that.
I might, if it's okay, I might just submit a single glossary.md to start off, and then if you guys want me to break it up, I can do that too. Are you saying have like a one file, or are you saying have a directory of a directory of
file.
everything gets its own? Okay.
I was thinking one file, but I was thinking each term might need its own PR. But yeah, put it all in one, and it'll just get a big PR too. And it's not that many people that are going to comment.
Well, could we do the kind of thing we did with the other one, is get a template in place so that if you get the structure in place, that people can make individual PRs and individual terms.
Think of that, Alex. Does that work?
Yeah, it's even easier. Make me lazy. That's fine. So I'll submit the PR with all of a bunch of definitions, maybe just stubbed out. Is that what you're saying, Steve?
Yes, but even just a template without any definitions, just the header, and then people can start inserting their definitions, individual PRs. If there's a couple like artifact, or there's probably a couple of things that you can stick in there just to prime it as a template, but make it as minimal so there's no controversy on getting that merged, and then people can start doing PRs against that baseline for individual terms.
Great. Okay. All right. So my to-do will be to PR glossary template. We have about 15 minutes left in this working session. Are there any other topics that we wanted to talk about? Do we want to continue discussing what we've been? Yeah. Go ahead, Kyle.
So there's two PRs that I have, one for Alpine and one for improvements to the OCI, that there was a merge conflict because the lines in that table, right, got me. So I fixed those this morning. So those are more or less ready. They do not have conformance tests. I wasn't planning on adding those at this point, but they're essentially ready to go. I think Steve approved them, but someone's got to merge it. Well, someone's got to merge one, and then it's going to have another conflict that I'm going to have to resolve almost surely, because I think we changed the same line. So it's white space changes kind of thing. So if one gets merged, then I'll fix the other one again, and maybe we can get those merged.
Okay. What I can do is by like 6 p.m. Mountain, if there's no dissenting comments, then I can just approve and merge that too.
Okay.
Sounds great.
Now it's back to Alex's question of what are we doing for our last 10 minutes?
If you guys want to go do other things, I'm always down for that too. So, yeah.
Well, I'm just thinking, summarizing the meeting so far, I really like how we have kind of set a goal of creating a common terminology that will rally other folks around, and then after that we'll be able to better come to common implementations or closer implementations. That's really cool. Another thread that I heard in today's meeting, which I want to help you all with, is bring in folks that are trying to do this, like actual customers. Having been a PM, like always better to have one customer than none. So like that's the WASM people or the CNAB people or the Acorn people. Try to get one of them in here talking with us that's actually trying to use OCI for something more. So I guess I'm taking away to try to talk to those people, I guess, at KubeCon and bring them our way. Like I don't know if there's any other suggestions. Those are the two main things I kind of am taking away from today.
I think that our meeting time is prohibitive, and I think that if we want a stronger attendance here, that we have to figure this out. And so because I know this is like, if I was in Europe or somewhere else other than middle America, I wouldn't want to attend this meeting at this time. So I think that's going to be a barrier to participation.
Yes, but you
In
can
term-
participate. True. We should move the meeting time, but it doesn't preclude people to contribute with PRs and others. We've had people join in there, and if there's enough people joining from PRs that are in Asia or Europe, because Asia and Europe and US, there's always that triangle conflict. We can adjust the time.
In
A good
terms of next
suggestion,
steps,
Steve, to send people to the Ouija artifacts repo too. Is that? Well, I don't know. I'll be quiet. Not sure if that is or not.
I don't want to stop the finish of that one point there before I jump in. I was going to take a slightly different direction.
Go for it. I'm out.
All right. Yeah. In terms of next steps that I was thinking of, I'd love to dig into what the Helm group was looking at when they were saying, hey, we need a search interface and we don't have that in OCI. I'd like to try to dig into exactly what some of the challenges were they were facing and what possible solutions we could create and how that would apply to more than just Helm. So that's kind of my thought process is what did they need they didn't have and how do we create it?
Do we could ask, like, say, Andy Block to come and, speak to us one of these meetings. Should we do that?
And I'm fine if we pull in some of their team. I'm also fine if there are people here that are familiar with some of the challenges they are facing. It sounded like it was mostly just a search issue. Like they had a whole lot of different charts with different projects. And they had challenges when they store it all as one big thing with a whole bunch of versions in there. But if they start to break it up into separate repositories, it sounds like it's just a how do we find all those repositories kind of challenge.
I'm almost thinking, let me ask Andy to open an issue in the repo describing things and then potentially come talk to us too. But
yeah, they had an issue on there on describe what people need. There's a couple of different places that was described. Because it was search, but there was also some issues specific around version ranges. The way the tags, the tag API doesn't support the ability to know, give me anything within this version band, for instance.
So it wasn't just find the repo, but it was find more metadata than just what the tag interface has. So maybe annotations and other fields they would need.
Well, it was literally, can we do a better search on the tag listing API? So it was, can we come up with a catalog API that lists all the repos, to your point? Some have catalogs, some don't. So we deprecated that. So what is the replacement for list me all the repos that are in a registry? And then the other is, great, you have the tag listing API, but it wasn't granular enough and rich enough to be able to do version ranges.
I think this gets at the question we were talking about before of like, so how much of this is the server side functionality versus the client side? Like,
Yeah.
Is it terrible to download all of the tags and then
Yes.
filter it by what you want? Like maybe you want the last digit to be the most important one. I don't know, like
it depends on the registry as to how bad it is. Because to give you an example, I think Quay caps you at 50 tags per API call. And so you have to hit it with a whole lot of API calls back and forth until you get all the tags in a full tag listing.
I think this also goes back to the thing that was really good to call out on the last, I think it was last time, where we were discussing the value of a client versus a server. And that might be a section of the article itself. Like, here's the patterns that apply to both, because I think it was interesting for me as we were discussing everything from ephemeral clients to stateful clients, because moving something to the client is somewhat dependent on that. But even when you're doing server to server, call it mirroring, call it replication, whatever you want, those are stateful quote clients. So I think both are important. but we should, in my opinion, we shouldn't just assume it can only be client and leave the registry to be the dumb storage bucket. I think we can make incremental improvements on the expectations of registries to support both scenarios, because both are important, both stateful clients and stateless clients. So I guess that would be an interesting part of the article or another article to talk about why these are the kind of scenarios that package managers should support. And package managers do, right? It's like that's the point, is some package managers do support it, some don't. And I think we get caught into justifying why we don't need to add something versus we probably should.
So we have 4 minutes. So it's kind of this is the thought experiment that's going through my brain right now. So you know, I realize, you know, I'm not trying to disagree with Steve's point at all with respect to OCI thing, but I'm gonna laser focus on OCI for the purposes of this conversation. So to see if we can highlight what's missing in OCI. So imagine you were to take like, you know, Alpine or Debian or whatever, that kind of package manager system, and put it into OCI, right? Like, say you just, for whatever reason, they decided they wanted to do this. They woke up one day and they're like, oh, our package manager, we don't like it for some reason, so we're gonna switch to OCI, whatever. Imagine that happened, right? Besides us being all happy, maybe, but what would they do, right? What would we actually, if they came to us and we wanted to recommend, you know, you should probably store things this way or whatever, would we say, you know what, I think you should put all of your boost libraries in a single repository, or maybe you should put just every version of this package, you know, lib boost -dev in there, or you know, and so then you have all of your boost and all of its sub libraries, and you know, because there's like 50 or so packages that install boost, right? It's a monster. So maybe that goes in one repo. And then you have Python. Maybe that goes in a different repo, that, you know, the packages for supporting that operating system for Python. Or maybe they all go in one big monster repository in OCI. I'm curious, like, just for the sake of thought experiment, what people think as to how they would organize things.
So I think that what happens is when we index whatever we index, whether it's manifests or other metadata types, what we're going to see is the entire registry becomes a single namespace that's determined based on your authorization to these other namespaces. So the thought experiments I've done on what you're talking about is, you know, when you query into that, the response is based on your authorization, but then what you're actually looking at is a single namespace.
Yeah, so when you say single namespace, I'm interpreting that as single repository, right? I think namespace is actually probably the right term, I think, but yeah.
And yeah, Brandon.
Yeah, I've also thought that some of these scenarios we get into may easily turn into a index repository of some kind. I think some of the tough people are also looking at scenarios like this, where they have some data that is stored in one repository that has pointers to other places. And then the code would just need to know to go look up the index repo to see a bunch of the stuff that's there, and then know, okay, if I'm querying, you know, whatever the package is, I can go find that in this other repository, and then it knows how to go over there and look it up. So it may kind of be this layer on top of OCI. It sits there to be able to put this metadata that people need to be able to implement their workflows. Steve?
Yeah, I was just going to say the example for Alpine is exactly what the Helm team did, right? The Helm team was using something else that wasn't scaling to the volume of changes that get applied, because it was targeted at a more curated scenario. And when they switched to OCI, they have gaps. So in that one, you know, it's what we've been discussing, the search APIs, and they've got a couple of things in the list. So that's how we need to solve it ourselves on the OCI space. And then how does NuGet npm Debian solve the SBOM additional metadata scenario in their registries?
Yeah, I think so. The way, Brandon, the way you described it, of the index repo, master repo, maybe that contains the catalog, that gets downloaded, and maybe there's versions of the catalog, and then that has application relevant pointers to other repos, other places, maybe not even OCI, right? They could go out of the universe. The one downside of thinking about things that way is that you don't have real traceability within OCI as far as like garbage collection is concerned and who owns what, right? So like those pointers are not known pointers to OCI, right? So it's hard for any system to kind of do the reverse lookup and say, well, okay, this package, who needs it? Where is it being pointed to from? Those kinds of things are all too opaque.
Yeah, it's not necessarily known to OCI. I wouldn't know that you've got this pointer over to another repository. It's definitely working around a problem at a layer outside of what OCI gives you. And so you're putting that in there. The reason I kind of think along those lines, though, of putting some kind of extra layer there is just knowing that there are scenarios where people need to have different access to different areas, and you don't have any concept of a cross-repository pointer in OCI today. And so you're almost stuck with putting it and saying, here's a repository name, the tag structure, and that's what's going to keep that stuff from being GC'd over there, is that they're just going to have their own tags within that repository. And that's mostly just a reference of saying, look, I'm a Helm chart. I've got a bunch of container images, and I reference those with a reference string as a container image, and tools know how to parse that and find that in a repository somewhere. It's similar to kind of putting that kind of pointer that's sitting in the Helm chart. It would just be some kind of other data structure that just has similar pointers over there. It just says, here's where to go find these other projects that are affiliated.
If OCI could actually dereference that pointer and understood it, right? Then you basically have CNAB, right? Like if I want to copy my Helm chart,
through everything in one.
Like copy -- recursive or something, and it's like, oh yeah, go copy my Helm chart and the things it goes and wants to reference or something. I don't know.
I get the feeling you're not going to say copy every Helm chart in the entire Helm ecosystem. You're going to want an individual version of one chart.
Yeah.
A couple versions.
You pick one version of one chart,
and so in that case, you will know. In those cases, you will know what to do. Sorry, Alex, I see you with your hand raised, and I also see that we ran completely over time there. Go ahead.
That was the impetus for my hand raise. I was going to say, awesome. You guys are talking about the things that I find very, very groovy about this entire topic. Victor also put in another use case into the chat, which is, I think, actually both a use case and an approach to solving the problem that we're discussing here. So I think that's an interesting. That might be an interesting reference that we want to capture.
Maybe I'm making misunderstood. So I'm actually new to a lot of this. So, but the artifact group that's being worked on here, it seems to be a need for the ecosystem, the CNCF ecosystem. But the paper I cited above, that gives the actual use case in the real business world. There's a real need. So let's say without this user group, without what you're working on right now, what happened to the user group, the real need in the real world that's not being addressed? And I guess from the charter for this group, I cannot tell.
I can take a stab at that, and then people can dissent. And we're over time, so I think we could just say that we're in the extra session if anybody needs to drop. I think that what the implications of us not achieving our stated goals is that we perpetuate a heterogeneous ecosystem, and we're going to continue getting frustrated by the mismatch in metadata formats and distribution models. And so I think to me, what we're looking at is trying to standardize on promote this idea of a federated. To me, it's a federated solution we can have one format that allows people to participate with their existing distribution models. But turn it over there to anybody who wants to. You guys are supposed to disagree with me. Come on.
Well, we don't.
Damn it. Okay. Well, we're over time. I don't. If there's any last words before we punch out of here, please throw a hand up or just speak up, and if not, then we can just conclude. Cool. Victor, did that kind of address your question, or did you want to take this to Slack and discuss a little bit more?
Yeah, this is actually in the charter already. What I mean is for the people, the non-technical folks. What is this? I'm sort of a semi-technical. I'm not just learning in this field. But if I'm not technical at all, I'm just a user. What is the benefit from the work product from this group in the real world?
So I'll take a stab at that. So from you put your business hat on, right? And you could argue, I think, that if you could do what Alex was saying, you could reduce the cost of serving artifacts like packages or whatever they may be, and replicating them and so on. I think you could make that argument. I think turning it into a fully content addressable model, easy to put proxies in front of, easy to determine where you're going to get those blobs from, can ultimately reduce cost of doing lots of different things.
Yeah. I think if that can be put in the charter and be more clear, I think that would be useful.
That's great. That's great feedback. Is that can we just Victor? Could you open up an issue and kind of clarifying what it is that we want to see in the charter, and then we can collaborate around what that looks like.
Okay.
Yeah, that'd be very helpful. Cool. Okay. Thank you everybody for staying. Josh gave us a check mark, so I think we've checked the meeting box.
I just meant it was a good idea to open an issue. Yeah.
Okay. But thank you everybody for staying in our 8 minutes after our usual meeting time, and let's collaborate in Slack, GitHub, and I look forward to seeing everybody next session.
Thank you, Alex.
Thank you.